Hi, my name is John Rapp. I'm a practicing lawyer like the others here. I wanted to start by just thanking Jay and Noah and Lila and Sue, as well as the folks at Poplar and Pulse and the Center for the Study of World Religions, and a couple others who have inspired me. Paul Stamets, who I work with sometimes, who's up in Seattle, where I do most of my work, and also PIR, which some of you know about, Psychedelics in Recovery, which is basically 12 steps plus ayahuasca, which is starting to have some real successes. I also wanted to start by just saying how much I wish I were here for the so-called Holy Week, when Passover ends, when Easter comes about, because the Marsh Chapel, some of you know about the Marsh Chapel experiment. Well, the Marsh Chapel is less than 2 miles from here. And it just so happens in 1962, when the Marsh Chapel experiment occurred, it was on 420. It's on 420 again this year. So 420 in my Entheist church, we celebrate both that experiment and cannabis itself. The previous day, 419, is obviously Bicycle Day. In addition, on 419, I'm going to be going through the end of the Lesser Mysteries and the beginning of the Greater Mysteries up in Seattle, potentially with Carl Ruck. So it's going to be an interesting month for all of us, I hope. My life changed forever. I'd never had a psychedelic till I was 57 years old. I think some of you got started a little earlier than me. I can tell you the folks here on the panel, who I also thank, Dr. Joe, who's actually a close associate of my ayahuasquero, Matt Meyer, and Allison, Izzy, and Matt, who were involved in all of this long before I was, and also been involved in the practice of psychedelic law longer than me. The reason I was such a latecomer here is that on January 2nd, 2020, about a month before COVID, my son died. After a 13-year battle with opiate addiction. At the end of his life, one of the most important things to him was his involvement with the Seattle Decrim Nature, which in 2021, October of 2021, passed unanimously a decrim resolution through the city council. 2020 was also hard on my practice as a lawyer. After settling a big class action that year, I discovered that a lot of my usual big commercial clients preferred to spend their money on their employees during COVID instead of on, overpriced trial lawyers. So after a few months of just being sad, dealing with the lockdown, dealing with the ratcheting down of my pretty traditional career at that point, I thought, well, what the heck? So I did 13 ayahuasca journeys over the next year, and I discovered that it helped me tremendously. It was an eye-opener. It changed my life. So I thought, what can I do? Well, one thing I'm going to try to do is not to repeat everything that's been said already or is about to be said by these terrific colleagues of mine. I thought I would make just a couple of distinctions, though, for those of you who don't practice in this area, things that I explain in my intake with my clients. There's a big difference between things that are legal, things that are defensible, and the decriminalization or deprioritization activities that most of you are aware of. And this is something we have to explain to our clients a lot, because some of them believe that they just kind of get a free pass. And we do have, if they claim to be a religion, and we do have something, as Victoria mentioned earlier, a presumption in this country, quite a powerful one, under the IRS rules and regulations and law, that generally a claim of being a church is presumptively honored. On the other hand, the question is, how do you get ready? So when a client comes to me and says, look, at this point we want to make sure we're doing everything right, what I talk to them is about a series of distinctions. I talk about the difference between safety and sincerity. And within sincerity is basically a pretty simple distinction. Actions speak louder than words, right? So most of the folks who come to see me, I have clients with 2 members. I have clients with over 100,000 members. How do you prove that 100,000 people are all equally sincere? I can tell you that the founders, I don't believe I've ever had a psychedelic church leader come to me, no matter how strange their practice may be, I've always concluded that they themselves are sincere. But whether everybody in their church is a whole different question. We also talk about safety because, as Martin emphasized, and I'm sure the other folks here will too, there are legitimate safety concerns, particularly with certain molecules. People forget to distinguish between the different molecules. And there has been, so we do mock site inspections, just as if we're the DEA for them. Some of you know about the SoulQuest case, which resulted in a $15 million wrongful death verdict last year. And only a few weeks later, someone was killed in a very similar way in Australia. Completely avoidable if there had been medical personnel on site. Anyway, I want to end with one thing because I'm down to less than 2 minutes. There's been a lot of talk today, and I agree with it, that there's a huge presumption in favor of organized religion. And I wanted to read you a dicta from the Myers case, which you've heard a lot about, which is the one we look to the most for the Myers test of sincerity, or of sincere religiosity. Had Myers asserted that the Church of Marijuana was a Christian sect, and that his beliefs were related to Christianity, this court probably would have been compelled to conclude that his beliefs were religious. Under these hypothetical circumstances, Myers would have been able to fit his beliefs into a tradition that is indisputably religious. If Myers had linked his beliefs to Christianity, the court could not have inquired into the orthodoxy or propriety of his beliefs, no matter how foreign they might be to the Christian tradition. Had Myers sincerely made such a connection, he would have been able to purchase religious status for his beliefs by coattailing on Christianity. Unfortunately for Myers, he made no such connection. This is also the theme of Allison's latest article, which I highly recommend to you. And I think very much, along with the IRS test, which I could get into later, if you want, ask for people to have ecclesiastical government, bishops, deacons, Sunday school, seminary. Seriously, are these the things we're going to require for true religious protection? I see it very differently, and I appreciate you all being here today to help in this holy cause.